Hello and welcome to ACARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts will share strategies that agencies can help alleviate obstacles and still remain in the way of a true DevOps transformation. My name is Kirsten Patton, and I will be moderating today's panel discussion. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and it is a nonprofit organization that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through government, on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to welcome all of our attendees for joining us today. This afternoon, we are going to hear from our panelists, followed by a Q&A session. That being said, I want to please encourage you all to submit questions of your own in the Q&A section down below. And also, we will have 3 poll questions. So if you would like to receive your CPE credits for today's event, be sure to respond to all 3 of those. And with that said, I'd like to welcome our panelists to please come on camera and go off mute. And we're going to begin with a round of introductions. So if each of you could please introduce the audience via your name, your agency or organization, and what it is that you do there. I'm going to call on Audrey. Audrey, will you please kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to kick you guys off with thanking ATARC for this opportunity, and thank you, Kristen, for serving as a moderator today. I am Audrey Story, and I'm serving as the Deputy CIO at the Administration for Children and Families within HHS. Here I do a large support of aligning all the work I do with the CIO, CTIO vision and making sure we have the appropriate resources, making sure we're having that transforming and emerging technology, and ultimately make sure that we're serving our customers, providing that first-class, first-rate service.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And let's jump to Don next.
Oh, thank you. My name is Don Bauer. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Global Talent Management in the Department of State, which is essentially HR. I manage the HR IT footprint for the global workforce, including 2 personnel platforms, one for overseas and one for domestic. And I manage a team of about 300 developers and analysts.
Fantastic. Thank you. Jordan, let's hear from you next.
Hello, everyone. So Jordan Casper, I'm a senior advisor in the Office of the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Homeland Security. Relatively new here, but have bounced around other government agencies before. I'm a technical advisor, so I'm a recovering software engineer. As you might imagine, the Office of the Chief Information Officer handles a lot of the enterprise-wide developer operations capabilities, everything from source control to automated governance and compliance. And so I advise on a number of those initiatives.
Recovering, that's too funny. Ms. Raven, we'll hear from you next.
I'm hurt, Jordan. Very hurt. I'm Raven Manuel from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is a unit within the Smithsonian Institution. I am the senior application developer and DevOps engineer. I've been with NMOC for about 7 years. Within my role as a developer, I actually, when the interactives are very simple to create, I actually implement the interactives for exhibits. Most of my job is research and development to look for ways to enhance the visitor's experience. And as DevOps engineer, I come up with the policies and the process and the strategies for our unit. I collaborate with my colleagues on other units, and I'm always updating the strategy. So it's never really done. It's never really complete. The end.
Wonderful. And Frank, of course, let's hear from you.
All right. Thanks, Kristen, and thank you for having me. And hello, everybody. I'm Frank DeViglio. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, as part of the Department of Commerce. So I work in the CIO's office, and similar to what other folks have said, we work on enterprise problems, and my focus is to get technology and to get the mission accomplished. So that ranges from desktops to all the way to HPC and beyond. So it's a great mission, right? We're here more than forecast. We're doing long-term predictions and wonderful and we have a wonderful mission space from the surface of the sun to the bottom of the ocean. So we get to do a lot of fun science in the middle of there. So I appreciate the time and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. And I'm actually going to start with you for our first question. And just for the panelists, we don't need to go in any particular order necessarily, but I'll try and get each of you to be able to start with one question as we go through. So Frank, you have that honor right now. Kick us off. I want to hear from you a little bit about what you think should be prioritized the most when it comes to gains and furthering the DevOps transformation roadmap. So whether that is a shift in mindset or digital technologies, anything else that hasn't been mentioned, kind of talk to me about that a little bit.
So I think it's both, right? I think the bigger part of it is mindset, right? Like any technology, you're gonna have end users or customers that they're running towards it, which is just a great thing, right? They're your biggest champions, they're your biggest advocates, but they're the users that will have to kind of bring along and work from their old process to the new process, right? So I think they're both the easiest and the hardest sometimes, but they're the most important, right? But I think that mindset change also shifts outside of that customer set or outside of that technology set, right? It's more of a governance, maybe it's not the right word, but oversight and governance, only because, right, we're talking about DevOps and transformation, and that is a highly, supposed to be a highly iterative process to solve a problem. So that governance needs to change too, right? It has to become a little bit more nimble, a little more iterative. And that includes, how do we find technology to solve the problem? What works best for teams? What works best for the process? What that process needs to look at, how that process needs to change. And I think that stretches, not only from governance, acquisitions, things like that, all the things that support all these folks that are going to go and do this needs to kind of build on that nimble view of the world. And the technologies, I think, again, they're important. They're just as important, but there are, as everybody knows here, there's probably a bunch of ways to solve a problem through technology. And I think that's part of it too, is that nimbleness is, how do we iterate on tools, pick the right ones, and how do we kind of embrace the change that we may need in either changing platforms or technologies over time. So I think it's multifaceted. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Thanks for kicking us off. I don't know if Dawn knows this or not, but if you're off mute, I'm going to go ahead and call on you. So Dawn, I think you've got something to share.
Well, I take a different tack to this, and it might, I think it's more, I have to look at things in an operational context, right? I have a 24/7 operation. We're global. So we have people online 24/7 because as the sun rises in other countries, we have embassies coming online and using our tools and platforms. So, I kind of looked at DevOps as a strategy to arrive at that repeatability and consistency that you need in your environments. I mean, we've spent a lot of energy creating pipelines, which really increase the velocity of the teams when you're iterating. To Frank's point, that iterative nature, if a engineer can check code into the repository and the pipeline automatically scans it, builds it, deploys it, puts it on the server, and I'm immediately testing it, well, that whole entire flow and process really makes it nice. The other aspect of that is, and something we suffered with, is people mucking around in the technology once it gets on a server. They go in and tweak a setting and it doesn't get captured in configuration management, and then you go to production and it's broken. So this way we've really tried to use this as an opportunity we have scripted infrastructure. So we build the server from scratch, we deploy it, so we know for sure that whatever's there and we deploy, it's going to work if it works in the other environments. Because majority of us that work in multiple environments, that's usually the challenge, is like you move it from one environment to the next and something breaks, you're like, what's different? And DevOps kind of following that discipline. And to your point, it's probably a lot more culture, because you got a developer, I'm a recovering developer too, and you got to have that discipline to say, I got to check the code in, I got to tweak the software, check it in and build it, not fix it on the server and then, for a quick test. So over.
Thanks, Dawn. Raven, go for it.
You guys are hurting my soul. So I want to first address, thanks, Kirsten, for inviting me. I want to address those units, agencies that are smaller, not meaning you're small with people, but your IT operations is a smaller thing. You don't have that big bureaucracy. I agree with what Frank has said and Don has said, but for those who are not that you're just getting started, but you haven't really started because you really don't understand really where to get started. You know all about things and you might have implemented tools and you're not quite sure why you implemented tool. Maybe a vendor or a contract company told you to do that. But I'd like you to step back is what I would want people who are just in the beginnings, step back and ask yourself, did I actually define the problem of why I need DevOps? And I say that because for our unit, for building the strategy, as a solo developer, I actually use our strategy, but not the whole thing. Don's talking about this big, humongous pipeline. You may not need that much of infrastructure. If you're doing Agile, you may not even need a lot of the check-in. You may not need that. You need GitHub, of course, or GitLab, whatever your source repository is, but you really should, you have to, and even those who are they're in the intermediate stage or they are accustomed to DevOps, you need to come back every once in a while and check in to see what problem you're trying to solve. Because even when you get down the line, your problem that you had before may not be the problem now. Maybe there's another problem. The other thing with addressing tools, and this is my last point, is I did that. Epic fail. I had to walk back and be embarrassed with my management and leadership team because they wanted to see performance, they wanted to see metrics. And the only way you can really do that is by doing the process, right? And if you're doing the process, you have the strategy, you have the process, but you also need the tools. So I focused on tools because they were going to meet the metric. Wrong answer. Now for our strategy, what I look at before tools is the standard. Because as you know, all of these different tools are either going out of style or it's the Betamax VHS. And so VHS works when it should have been Betamax. So look at the standard because it's going to change. Your tools will change, but the standard will only get better. So if you are running tools that are based off of the standard, then the tools change won't impact you as much. So step back, reassess, and don't go by tools, go by standards or whatever it is that will guide you in standards like security.
Thank you, Raven. Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna build and backtrack just slightly on what Raven said, because I think that's really important. You know, the prompt was what should be prioritized to have the most gains. Buying tools is what I'm tacking on with Raven. Like buying tools isn't what's going to get you the most gains. Like buying things is buying things. It's more difficult here at DHS than maybe it is at other places, but it's buying stuff. We don't have the people to do what Raven just said, to step back and say, oh, this is the right approach. And that is the right standard to follow. And this is the right process to implement. We don't have the right people to do that. And I'm saying we, and I don't mean the Office of the Chief Information Officer at DHS per se. In government, big government, we don't have the right people. It takes us forever to hire technical talent. They tend to roll out. And a lot of times we're not getting that private industry flair and innovation to come back into government to tell us. I was, before joining DHS, 2 jobs before joining DHS, I was a member of the United States Digital Service, a group that intentionally tries to bring private industry folks into government for tours of duty to bring that knowledge in and then send them back and let them go back to their innovative lives, but then maybe, you know, have that rotate back in. And so I know we have maybe some prompts later about the personnel and the people, but the biggest gain we can make is ensuring that we get people motivated to come into government for public service, that those people are highly technical, and that we assess them properly on that technology.
Thank you, Jordan. And Audrey, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, first, I agree with everyone when everything has been stated, and I'm going to try to find a point to talk where things have not been covered. So for where I'm at the strategic level, whenever we have any type of transformation, I'm always thinking about how does this impact the culture? And is the culture ready for this transformation? And then I'm also thinking about the soft skills of the DevOps engineers, because that's very important. Our DevOps engineers, they're very smart people, but in order to really sell a transformation or bring the value in it, you have to be able to have those soft skills to really be able to have that integration across from the dev team and also to the ops team and also to the governance team. And then you have to really think about the tools and the skill sets to utilize those tools, because tools are there, they're there to automate our life, to make it better in terms of automate the testing, looking at automating what you can in your infrastructure. So when we're looking at our roadmap, we're really looking at, for DevOps, to determine what could be implemented first. We're thinking about the criticality of the mission for that project. But we're really thinking about the culture of our organization and how can we create an environment where they're ready to adapt to that change. And we do that, one, by making sure folks are clearly understanding what that change could look like with DevOps, right? There's so many words out there, but how do we ensure that our resources understand that? Because it's larger than the developers, and it's larger than the security folks, and it's larger than the operations folks understanding that. We have to have a culture that understands that. So with something we've done, and it worked out really well, we started integrating the understanding of all those techniques from Agile through making business Agile projects. And doing that, we were able to bring in the whole organization to get the concepts of what Agile means. What does it mean to do DevOps, even in a business project? So we're bringing in that understanding of it first to help develop that culture, to championship that whole evolution of what DevOps really look like. And then we're always having touch points with people like, how's it doing? My CIO he's excellent with that. He issues a letter every week just to talk to the folks and say, what's going on in the culture? And here's a link you want to send to me to let me know what you're thinking. So we really try to have a close pulse on the culture here.
Fantastic. Any other comments from?
I love that, Audrey, that last point, the kind of feedback loop coming back to leadership. Love it.
Yep. Anyone else? All right. Well, Audrey, you nailed it on that one, but I know it's hard sometimes being the last one to respond. So I'm going to call on you to kick us off for the second question I've got. I want to hear from each of you, and please, by all means, talk to your own personal experiences. What hurdles have you found that you've had to overcome in order to implement the best practices for your DevOps environment? Or maybe you're dealing with those now. And so if that is the case, what is kind of the mindset of how to overcome those challenges, or anything else that you can share with our audience related to that? So Audrey, I'm going to call on you to go first this time, but you're muted.
So in the early discussion, I talked about what we were doing within our culture to really move those things forward. And quite naturally, you're not going to move everything forward all the time, right? You are going to get some resistance from folks. And when you get that, you have to really understand what is the mentality or what's causing that level of resistance, right? Is there just not a clear path of understanding? Are folks afraid of change? What about the strategy that you have that you're not getting the buy-in to that? And are we focusing too much on tools? Is it too much ownership and they're not wanting to have the collaboration? Those were the challenges that we've seen. And to help move forward through those hurdles, we established a weekly, drop by and talk to the CIO, drop by and talk to the deputy CIO, drop by and talk to the folks that are on the team to give you the understanding that you may need, trying to create that transparent environment where they can be vulnerable and they're not afraid, and it's a safe place to really talk through in terms of what you don't know. Because the more we understand what folks don't know or what they're afraid to admit that they do not know, then we can help continue to move the organizational forward with all these great concepts. Again, you can say DevOps to someone who's in security and operation, they'll know what that means. But to another business partner that may work in acquisitions, they won't have that knowledge, but that's very important for them to have that knowledge as they begin to build those acquisitions. And we need a vendor to come in and use those techniques. So it's really getting everybody in the same place and trying to understand what are those hurdles so that we can move those hurdles forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Dawn, let's hear from you next.
So, love it, Audrey. I have to say, I'm so with you on the culture thing. So I work really hard with my organization, and I do a biweekly newsletter. And so, yeah, we have a lot of the similar, like, just opportunities to take the feedback. And I, one thing I've done is I've added I actually have an agile coach on staff. And this is that fear of talking to the boss syndrome that many people have. Is, I can be as open for people to come and talk to me, they still won't. And this having an agile coach to kind of have the ear of the team and give me that feedback, and then I can address it. And then that way people see that their feedback's being heard, even though that it came through a back channel. But a couple of things that we've done is, whenever we're gonna try something new, we do what a lot of people call a demonstration project. So we first look for volunteers, because there's always those few in your organization that are kind of like wanting to go do the new thing. And it's really important to let folks that want to innovate, give them a little space to actually go off and create something new. It helps them keep a positive mindset. And the demonstration projects will kind of try out our strategies, right? Like you said, Audrey, sometimes you need to loop the business owner in. You got to train people. I've done product owner training more than I've done developer training, because they need to be on board from a business context. When you deliver the first iteration, it's not the 100% product. That's a hard concept for a business owner to recognize. So once the demonstration projects are done, then we have like, I kind of call it like a murder board. We just sit down and go, okay, this is free space, say whatever you want. If it went well, say it went well. If it went bad, it's okay, it went bad. I mean, the idea is it's creating a safe space to really have that raw feedback, that how everybody felt about it. And then a lot of times we'll take that, the agile coach will look at it, we'll summarize it, and then if the policy needs changing, we change it. And that's also a very good process for your organization to know that we're not just like pounding our fist on the table, say thou shalt do it this way. It's like, no, we're going to do what works for us as an organization. And I don't want to forget what Raven said either. Standards. Those are always great to stay aligned with them, because as we know, they're coming at us from all different directions. And if you have that gives you a foundation. Over.
Thanks, Dawn. Let's hear Raven and then Frank.
Cool. So the first thing whenever we have this discussion, it really is all about culture. It really does come down to that. Culture is such a malleable type of word. It can mean just about anything. So for me, culture is compartmentalized, because it really just depends on what part of your organization, the culture that you're trying to address. So for me, the culture of, I don't like to say failure, but to win, to define a win, right? A win is successful when the thing works, right? When the thing works, then everybody agrees that is a win. But a win is also when it doesn't work, because you've learned something. And so you cannot be afraid to win when it doesn't work, because now you know something and you can learn from it and make it better, so that you get to your better definition of winning. I do like what Don says. That's actually part of my job, is building prototypes. When I'm not implementing interactions, I take tools, I take ideas, methodologies, and I build a prototype, because I want to prove that out to my management team. And Jordan, I recognize what you say, when you don't have that person or those resources to do what you need them to do, that I actually never even thought that a larger organization would not have one of me, right? I don't know. I just didn't remember.
Hey, if you want to come to DHS, Raven, anytime, you just let me know.
No. I have the best job ever, and I'm going to be the person in the basement with the red stapler. And then the other thing is, again, at whatever level needs to be there, whether it's the Scrum Master or the product owner, whatever level, they need to refocus their metric on performance. So whatever that metric is that they are trying to get out of that philosophy of DevOps, because that's a philosophy. It is not a prescriptive list. It is like Agile. That's a theory. You kind of do what you need to do. And so when you understand your metric of performance is not a number, it has to be something else, even though numbers are really a good baseline for you to know whether you met them or did not meet them. The culture can be a metric, right? Is everybody coming out of the sprint like, oh my gosh, I just got beat up? That's not a good performance if your team doesn't feel like they just feel beat up from that. That's a soft skill. It is a soft metric, and it needs to be defined. It has to be part of that. Just a shout out to Jordan, when you worked at the digital services, you actually came to our unit and it was a great experience. So anybody
Right.
wanting to use that, it was great because it helped all the other people who did not understand about digital understand what Agile does for a project. I just wanted to give him a shout out, even though he's a reformed, whatever.
Awesome. Thank you, Raven. Frank, and then we'll hear from Jordan after Frank.
So everyone's making great points. Raven's points are great. Don, Audrey, everybody. I think, and I don't know if how different I'll be, but I'll try to build on it a little bit. I think one of the things that, and I think this is kind of indicative of the kind of discussion that we're having, right? We talk about DevOps. I've heard the word agile, process, tools, right? There's lots of things that revolve around it. So there's different viewpoints, right? And how do we build out culture? How do we around that process or whatever we're going to call it to get to where we want to go? I think having that kind of part of that culture is getting people on the same page from the start, right? Getting everybody down, getting everybody to sit down together or as much as possible, kind of create that expectations, metrics, outcomes, right? These are the things we're shooting for. This is the way we're going to do it. And we may come back and change the way we're doing it, but we understand what the metrics are, we understand what the outcomes are. And I think Raven made a great point about, sometimes failure is success, right? It's knowledge either way. So we have to make sure that we get past that, success failure kind of mindset. Everything that we do will feed into the next iteration of the process. But again, having people kind of come together, understand those kind of shared values around, we may fail and that's okay. We're going to use, we're going to try to use these tools in this way, and this is how we're going to communicate, and these are the things that we're going to watch. And those are just some of them, right? I mean, you're talking about a pretty extensive discussion if you get it right. To kind of bring those folks together and kind of set the tone from the beginning. And that, again, like the process, you'll iterate over it and you'll change it, but it becomes then part of the process, right? What are we looking at this week? How do we change it this month? I think that becomes the cornerstone of what a good process could look like. And I think because there's so much, not ambiguity, but so much kind of interpretation, even between, our small group here, that having that kind of cornerstone would get you kind of past some of the hurdles that could come up.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And Jordan, let's hear from you next.
Yeah. Always agreeing with my counterparts here. I'm going to build off something that I heard Audrey say, and I don't want to mischaracterize it, so I'm just going to say what we have at DHS. We are very fractured. DHS, for those that don't know, third largest agency in the federal government. And we actually celebrated yesterday our 20th anniversary as an agency. When it came together, you all probably know it was a lot of independent organizations that had their own CIOs and their own processes and everything. 20 years in the government is not that long, and so we have not overcome a lot of that. The HQ CIO office where I work tends to not own too much, right? Because the components own a lot of that. And what that leads to is a lot of people having very different definitions of DevOps. And this is the part that I think I heard Audrey say, which is you go to our CISO shop and you say, what is DevOps? And they're going to say something very different than when you go to the CTO shop. And then when you start to filter that down into the components, you of course have lots of different views. And so a lot of people see DevOps as continuous integration of code. Certainly part of it, right? Automated testing, building of the code, maybe delivering of an image, a container image to be deployed. But obviously there's so much more that can and should be part of that automation process. To what Don was saying, I think in answering our first question, removing the humans from that part, not having them logging into servers and touching things. And so at the DHS HQ level, CIO shop, we try and help define that both through things like relatively easy to read, plain language playbooks, but also through enterprise tooling that has an intake process that allows us, the relatively better experts in the department, say, wait, you're doing what now? Okay, let's rethink that. Let's step back. Let's redefine what that is, and hopefully be able to provide you a tool that can offer the various pieces that really need to be, from testing to building to security to deployment to automated governance on the back end. And so trying to help provide all those things in both thought leadership, but then also enterprise tools where we can.
Thank you, Jordan. Any other comments from our panelists here before I call for a poll question? All right, well, if our events team could go ahead and pop up the first poll question. And for our panelists, we do have a question in the Q&A chat. So take a minute to review that question and I'll ask it to you in a moment. But poll question number 1, just for our audience at home, on what level has your organization's DevOps transformation roadmap been affected by hybrid and remote work? Please go ahead and respond to that. And then as far as the audience question from H. Ahmed that came in just a few minutes ago, if you guys come off mute, I'll just go ahead and assume that you're okay responding to it. But he asks, what are some best practices for empowering non-technical professionals as citizen developers as part of a low-code DevOps approach? And shout out to Dawn as my first Scrum mentor back in DHS. So Dawn, I think this question might be for you first.
Well, I would not exclude my colleagues here from answering that question. I think back to what I was saying earlier, I feel like, I think Audrey said it best. You've got to involve everyone. Developers I mean, if we really boil it down, the developers are a tool to get something done for you. They're really, and the one cultural shift that I had to make when I took over my current organization was the developer was the UI designer, he was the business analyst, he was the coder, he was the tester. And guess what? As developers, we're not good at all of those. We're usually good at maybe 1 or 2. So diversity of skill and talent. I have UI UX specialists now. I have business analysts. I have security professional, I have architects. It really takes a well-balanced team to actually bring these through. And then of course, looping in the business owner and then understanding, I think, and I forget who said it, but man, focusing on outcomes, right? This isn't about checking a box or meeting some budget requirement. This is about delivering a capability to your end user community, whether it's the public or your internal employees, to complete a business function. And I think that's where that energy and focus needs to stay. And then the other stuff, it becomes a distraction. Over.
Thank you.
And I want to say a word. Is that cool? Wonderful. And it's like a parallel to what Don said, in the fact that I'm actually kind of wondering what a non-technical professional, how far out from the development process or the pipeline you're speaking about. So if it's like the project managers and the other people on the team, because it's a integrated team with everyone, you do have non-technical professionals there, and they are part of. When you have buy-in because you are part of and you're making decisions with, then that is empowering them. When you have, if you're going outside that circle and you're talking about, for us, it would be a curator, a historian, somebody who's truly, they know their laptops and systems, but they don't know that process is have not just a kickoff meeting, but we have like iterative meetings with people, and everybody is at that meeting. It's not just one level of person. I'm at a meeting. So if there is a decision to be made, I can say, no, that is not going to work because of X, Y, and Z. And to go back to Audrey's soft skill, you just need to know how to communicate that. You don't talk in acronyms and technical speak. You have to plain language is what you need to do when you're in that meeting to help non-technical professionals understand what the process is. But that whole thing about Agile and DevOps, that is amorphous. It is everybody actually fits into that bubble. And so empowering now non-technical professionals, they are already there's a magic wand. They are already empowered. They don't have to be empowered. They are already empowered. They make decisions.
Thank you, Raven. Anyone else from our panel? Would anyone else on our panel like to chime in? Okay, and if not, we do have another question that just came through. What does a successful, oh, this is from Anthony Burley. Hey, Anthony. What does a successful DevSecOps program look like from an end user and C-level line of business lead? Who would like to jump in and take that one from Anthony? Go ahead, Audrey.
Yeah, let me make sure I'm understanding. So what does a successful DevOps program look like to an end user
Transparent.
and to C-suite level? Is that what I'm understanding?
I think that's what it is. Anthony, if you want to clarify your question a little bit, go for it. But otherwise, Audrey, if you want to respond to that.
Yeah. So I think Don and Raven talked about that, right? It's just output. What is the output that the customer will receive that doesn't have a lot of complexity to utilization? The interface looks good. The customer is really understanding how the process works. If it's going to be an incremental delivery, and you're going to allow them to have the feedback to keep moving that on to get to the level of effort to get to the product that you want to receive, is really customer satisfaction is the end task for an end user. Are they satisfied with their production? Now, to the C-suite is understanding, for me, understanding those folks and how my CIO thinks. It's understanding timeline of delivery, right? Does this effort align with our strategic initiatives? Is there a priority button to get this out? When we do get this out, are we considering the user, that end user? Do we have too much complexity that we have a product out, but now it takes so much time to utilize, or that level of understanding is not there? It doesn't bring the value. So at the C-suite level is timelines, efficiency, ease of use, and also really the capability of it. Does utilizing this acronym or this evolution of DevSecOps or DevOps, whatever we're here, does it provide the capability needed?
Thank you, Audrey. Would anyone else like to chime in? Frank, did you come off mute to chime in?
Mm-hmm. So I think those are great points, Audrey. I think the two I would add, right, especially coming from a scientific organization, right, that somebody said transparency. I think I heard that in there, and I think that needs to be there, right? You have a process, you're going towards a goal. From an end user perspective, right, I'd want the transparency. At the end of a development process, a user may be doing forecast or research, and you want them to not only get the benefits of having improved their development process, but also understanding the changes that happen in that development process, so they understand what that piece of code or product or whatever is going to do when they trust it, right? I think that's one of the other things that you have from the end user perspective. And then the other from the C-suite, I think, was the other side of it. The outcomes, I think Audrey spot on there. I think the other part of it is how much more mission can you do, right? You're simplifying processes, you're putting people into empowering people to get what they need to get done, but how much more are they not worried about IT per se, or not worried about the intricacies of their IT things they take care of, but now they're really focused on mission, right? So that, I think it's a win for everybody, right? Everybody's empowered to push the mission forward, but from a C level, right? That's what I want to see, moving, how much are we applying to the mission? So
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Thanks for sharing, Frank. Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, just a short thing. It can be difficult if you're transitioning to more automation through DevOps processes for an existing program and existing system. It's a little easier to make some of those determinations of increased availability to execute on mission, or reduced number of bugs in the system because you have less humans tinkering with servers. When you start from a greenfield operation, it can be much more difficult to measure the success, the impact rather, of a DevOps process, because the goal is that you don't notice it's there, right? It's irrelevant. It's just a thing. It like I write code and then stuff exists over here and I don't see the stuff in the middle, and that's the point. So it can be difficult. And so there do have to be, you have to really think about the metrics of success there. If you're trying to argue for, we should really invest in DevOps at the beginning of this program, not start it without that, you have to be really careful about how you're measuring those. And it might need to be against a similar program. If your C-suite needs that kind of validation of okay, what's the impact of this investment in DevOps? You might need to look at similar programs, because you're not going to have the reduction in bugs because you didn't have them in the first place. So it can be a little bit difficult.
Thanks, Jordan. Dawn and then Raven.
Yeah, well, from where I'm at, and in the HR world, people are pretty unforgiving if there are pay affecting issues, right? In the software, especially when you run a personnel platform. And so from a C-suite perspective, I'm continuously answering to the undersecretary and senior leadership about the time to delivery for fixes, changes. They just changed, the NDAA had some features, had a pay provision in it that we had to implement. We had 60 days to do it. And I can tell you, 4 years ago, it would have taken me 6 months. My team did it in 3 weeks this time. And that was as a result of all the processes that we have in place and this business cooperation and the understanding of getting things done. So this, for where I'm at, somewhat what you were saying, Jordan, time to delivery is a great metric around what is it doing to your organization, because beyond that, it should be transparent. People should know that it's happening. It's just that you ask for a feature to be added, it gets put into production, and to Audrey's point, it works, people understand it, it just does what it's supposed to do. And my boss used to always say he didn't have any needs for fancy software, it just has to work, right? And the people need to understand it. And of course, everybody uses their banking app as the metric, right? I own my bank, I can do 3 clicks and pay my bills. Why can't I do that in HR? So we have a standard, and that's kind of how we approach it. Okay.
Thank you. And then
I'm going to do the end user perspective, because our end users are different. Public facing, your end users is the citizens, right? That's our end users. In the museum, the DevOps, that impact is, like Jordan says, you should not even, it's ubiquitous. You don't even know that it's even there, right? It's working for you. But for our end users, we have to think about accessibility and inclusion a lot. And that's something that we're focusing on. And that's one of the things I'm focusing on a lot for this year, even though I've been focusing on it for ever. That DevOps process has to be able to not be able to address the bell curve, underneath the bell curve, those type of applications, but it needs to be adaptable and flexible, that it could actually answer the other ones. Like for accessibility wise, it needs to have one digital product. That digital product has to be able to meet a whole bunch of different audiences. So if your process does not include somewhere, probably testing and a little bit of implementation, the flexible needs of that digital product, then from an end user's perspective, especially when it has to be accommodating, then it fails. It doesn't matter if it works for everybody else. If it misses like another subsection, then it's not a good process, and it's failing. Bad failure.
thank you, Raven. Any other comments before we move on to the next question? Okay, with that said, then I'm going to actually call for poll question number 2, please, up on the screen. What are some of the challenges that you have faced while implementing or modernizing your DevOps environment? So folks at home, please respond to poll question number 2. And also, I'm going to go ahead and say last call for audience questions, just because we're about running out of time. So go ahead and send those in now, or we might miss the time to do so. But that being said, Jordan, let's hear from you to kick us off on this next question, please. And this one is regarding turnover rates. So we talked about this a little bit earlier before, but let's dive into a little bit more of why are the turnover rates in this sector higher than others? And what has your organization done to help retain employees over time?
Yeah. So, I mean, clarifying, I don't see higher turnover rates in DevOps per se, but in technical roles for sure. And I think that when you look at government specifically, when you look at government employees specifically, the technical talent in government has a higher turnover rate than non-technical. And you know, we fail in a couple of ways to retain folks. And I generally put motivations for people to take another job in three categories. People can disagree, of course. One is just benefits, and that obviously includes pay, but it could be other things. One of those is the mission, the why. You know, what are you building and why are you building it? And then the third one, which is maybe somewhat unique to technologists, I'm not sure, is the technology you're using, and are you actually being able to innovate and use new things and being challenged in your technical mind. A lot of us technical folks are puzzle solvers. You know, I have where is it? I've got about, I don't know, 30 random puzzles on my desk. And because that's what we are, right? We're problem solvers. And if we're not being challenged to solve a problem, then we're probably going to get bored and go and try and solve it somewhere else. So DHS has obviously a vast mission. I mean, everything from border protection to emergency management, intelligence. There's all sorts of mission sets there. And so we don't fail on selling our mission to the people who are interested in those missions. And realistically, we don't fail on the overall benefits, right? People that come here, they come here because they're interested in the mission and they believe that the federal benefits package in total is reasonable. So that's not where we fail, generally speaking. Yes, people want more pay. You always want more pay, and the government's limited in that. But it's that technology stagnation that really kills us. If you're on a program for 10 years and you're doing the same tech day in, day out, and you're never able to innovate, you're not going to stay there very long. And so that's what we're really trying to do at DHS. We're actually, our CIO, Eric Heisen, is very focused on empowering the IT workforce, is how he puts it. And that's a lot of different things. It's one, taking people who maybe aren't so technical, but are in technical areas. Those could be product owners or product managers. There could be lots of things in that category, and saying, wait, are you interested in technical things? We can retain that workforce by upskilling you and maybe moving you parallel to another track and recategorizing your role. But it's not just that, it's also allowing people to innovate more, giving people the opportunity to have more mobility, and bringing in entry-level folks on the technical side, and then giving them the mentorship to actually grow in the mission, and not losing them because they're stagnating. We need to then be able to move them around. We need to be able to give them paths to grow on a technical level.
I love that. Thank you. Who would like to go next? Dawn?
Well, you know, I think if I've only had about 3 people leave in 5 years, so we don't have we're growing and it's hard to find talent. So I'll be, you know, that is still a challenge. And DevOps engineers, believe it or not, are the hardest things to find right now. I have a primarily contract-based staff, not federal. I have my management team is federal, but to your point, we just can't pay the kind of salary that many, like an Oracle DBA and some of these senior resources need. So we're somewhat challenged on that. So, but you know, I think I'm in total agreement with Jordan. It's you set the right environment and culture. And I can tell you, when I took over my organization, we were 10 years behind, still using platforms and the UI and UX of, you know, from 2008, 2010. We're now modernized, and I do allow R&D. So, you know, you have to kind of intentionally make space for that. But in the context of doing the mission as well. And of course, it's easy in HR because everybody uses something that you do. So we do have an opportunity to at least give people some fresh looks at technology. But the other side of that is, if you've got legacy, it's hard to support that as well, because there's nobody around to do that. And there's that weird, I think, Frank, you mentioned it, you're paying double, right? You're paying for the old while you're doing the new. And nobody in the budget and the finance world understands that whole concept. So over.
Thank you. Audrey, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to add, definitely in line with Jordan and Don, and those are all great comments. And I agree with that also, that tech workers need to know that they have the potential to grow in their role. That's really important. They are high commodity. You know, they don't really have to look for a job. They're going to get offers in so many places. It's like when you go down the street and there's a restaurant, you see so many doors open and you see folks out there waving to pull you in. You know, that's the audience of our tech workers today. They're extremely competitive. What we have done here at ACF, we built our office in a mindset of looking like Google, right? We've strapped down a lot of the cubicles. We bought in furniture that we didn't have to buy. We went out to Resource Place and found office furniture that looks pretty good, and tables and all those things, and lockers where folks can check out equipment, to try to bring that corporate feeling to a government environment, because our environment looks so routine. But when you have folks like Jordan and Don that, you know, like to solve puzzles, if they come into an environment and it looks different, it does give them that place of ingenuity, because it's a new look. It doesn't have that traditional government look. So we built collab spaces where they can sit down and talk about it. You know, you don't have to holler across a cube. You can sit at a table. We have the high tables like you would see at Starbucks. We've tried to bring in some ingenuity to keep the folks here, because we're understanding that they're a commodity. And then you're always going to have some turnover, right? You have leadership that has great, aggressive ambition goals, and those folks just don't want to be there because they know they can go somewhere else. So sometimes it's just that they're not aligned to the mission, in addition to, you know, they want to have the potential to grow. So we're finding that's working in both ways.
Those are great examples. Thank you. Frank, would you like to share?
Yeah, really quick. I agree with what everybody was saying. I think, the mission for us is the kind of the reason why people stay, right? The mission is, I think, why most of us stay in government. So kind of engaging in that mission early in people's career, right? They may not understand how the tech or their role could apply to that mission. So having that messaging out there, but then keeping them engaged through, I think Jordan said, defining a path, right? Making sure that there are job series out there, like data scientist is a new job series, right? But it's not really a new job in industry, right? There's got to be ways to kind of find ways to make it a little bit more competitive with industry, but also but provide not only the ability to innovate in their job, but also look for opportunities to be innovative across the agency, right? So we'll do things like hackathons and incubator projects where if you have a good idea and it passes the peer review of your peers, then we'll find a little bit of funding and kind of maybe we can push that project forward. And that spans the science and the technology. But again, they're not perfect. I'm not saying that that's perfect, but it's another way to keep people engaged and really kind of be able to have their ideas come out and they can celebrate them together, kind of thing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Frank and panelists, for sharing your insights. So we're coming close to our end time. That being said, I want to go ahead and put up poll question number 3 before I forget. How far along are you in your DevOps journey? So please respond to that, audience at home. And then for the last few minutes here, I want to hear from each of our panelists around a key takeaway from this discussion. So something that you think is of the utmost importance, or something that really stood out to you based on everything that's been said. And that is how we'll wrap up this panel discussion. So on that note, Raven, I'm going to ask you to please kick us off.
There's no right answer. That is my takeaway thing. As you can hear with all of the panelists representing a lot of different agencies, there is no one shoe fits all. And even if you have an agency like one of the panelists here, that still may not be a fit for you. So you need to know yourself, your organization. It will come back to culture. It is going to come back to redefining what a win is, and it will come back to figuring out your metrics. Those are just going to be general things. But how you achieve those, there's not a right answer. It's whatever's right for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Raven. Jordan, let's hear from you next, please.
Yeah, in a former life, I was a commercial code boot camp instructor, training people to go from other industries into technology. And the thing that we always said there, and the thing that I heard on this call from you, Raven, that I think is probably the most important thing for everyone else to take away is learn from your failure. And more importantly, do not be afraid to fail. Do not be afraid to try something, have it not work and say, okay, now we need to rethink how we did that. And there's levels of that. You don't want to do that on a $50 million program, but there are levels to that, but you need to fail. You need to learn from that.
Well said. Thank you. Audrey, let's hear from you next, please.
Oh, gosh, everything has been so great. It's hard to sum that up. I really like the part about having, I think that would maybe been you, Frank, or I'm sorry about the agile coach. You keep that on your staff. Am I getting that right? I love that. I'm sorry, that's done. I love that. I love that. And I like the part about having that demonstration project and, really the part, one of my colleagues just spoke about focusing on the outcomes, from the beginning, focusing on the outcomes. And I will say this, proud military spouse of 30 years. So my husband retired colonel. And in that capacity, I've lived all over the world and I've seen so many different operations and I've been able to glean on this. And so I'm always excited to be in these environments here where I can hear these great thinkers and continue to glean on the work, because as Raven said, there's no right answer. And the key is always to, which I do, and I'm not afraid to take the chance. You're hoping that it works out, but even if it's a failure, there is a lesson learned from that. And if you don't try, you get nowhere. But at least assert yourself on the effort and you could amaze yourself. It could be a complete success. So that's my comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And then we're going to go Frank, and then Dawn will be the one to wrap us up. Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard to sum up, but I think the takeaway from this is it's a journey, right? This is not something that you're going to implement overnight, right? These are business operations and people operations, and that's where I think that's where you have to focus. The technology will follow that. But people understand things and understand the direction they're going and how they're going to work together and how they're going to implement these kinds of processes. I think that's the journey, right? The technology will follow behind it, and they'll figure out the right tools to do that. So it's less as technology and more people operations, but they're fun journeys just the same.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dawn, go for it.
Well, look, I don't know that I have a whole lot to add to what's been said. I think I'll speak from a leadership standpoint, because I kind of feel like if you run a large organization as an executive, then it starts with leadership. Okay, you have to embrace it. You have to say it's okay to fail. You have, within boundaries, like you said, Jordan. So I kind of feel like you have to set the tone at the top with what and how the organization is going to operate. And of course, I think the other side of that is making sure that if things don't go well, you don't publicly embarrass people. I mean, all of those things that go with a culture of, we really care about what we deliver and we want everybody to go with us on that journey. And it's going to require us to have some discipline. It's going to require us to make a few course adjustments along the way. But if everybody's willing to bring themselves in and apply it to the outcomes that we're looking for, you'll get there, and I can tell you, it took us 18 months to establish our DevOps operation, and we're not done. We're only like 60 or 70% there. So it's not something, Frank said, it doesn't happen overnight, but half the battle is getting the people in the right mindset to actually say, hey, this is a good thing. And then also showing the people above, outside of my organization, it works, and look at what we've delivered, and our quality is better, and our stuff just works. It doesn't break all the time. All of those kind of intangibles come to the surface when you get good processes in place. And I think that's an important takeaway is, give it a good try, and the changes will be incremental, but they'll be valuable.
Yeah, well said. All of you had great takeaways. So thank you so much for that and being on this discussion today. We really appreciate your time, as well as the folks that are at home. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sending in your questions. It's really been a wonderful hour. And of course, I need to, oh, there's not a sponsor today. All right. Thank you, government folks, for being here online. And for the folks at home, if you enjoyed this content, I'm sure you will enjoy our next one, which is next Thursday for our weekly webinar series on business resilience, a team sport. So please go to our website, register for that, and we'll see you at the next one. Everyone have a great rest of your week. Bye.